I had just closed the biggest deal of my life, $45 million for Calloway Biosystems, the company I'd built from scratch in my garage 35 years ago. To celebrate, I took my daughter Madison and her husband Zane Brooks to the Driskill Grill, the fanciest restaurant in Austin. But as I walked back from taking a call confirming the wire transfer, a young waiter stopped me with words that chilled my blood. "Sir, I saw your daughter put something in your drink when you weren't looking. Let me back up and tell you who I am, because what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about family. My name is Griffin Calloway. I'm 58 years old, and I've been a widower for 3 years now since my wife Paige passed from cancer. That $45 million wasn't just money to me. It represented nearly 4 decades of my life, starting as a Navy engineer who had a big dream and a rented garage in what's now Austin's tech corridor. You know, back in the early 80s, people thought I was crazy. Here I was, a guy who'd spent 8 years in the Navy working on submarine electrical systems, suddenly talking about starting a biotechnology company in Texas. Hell, most folks barely knew what biotechnology was back then. But I'd seen the future during my service, watched how critical precise engineering was for life or death situations. That same precision, I figured, could revolutionize how we develop and transport medical compounds. Paige believed in me from day one. I remember the night I told her I wanted to quit my steady engineering job at Texas Instruments to chase this crazy biotech dream. We were sitting in our tiny apartment, eating takeout Chinese food, and I spread my business plan across our kitchen table. She looked at those hand-drawn diagrams and financial projections for maybe 10 minutes, then smiled and said, "Griffin, if you don't try this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." That was Paige. Always saw the big picture while I got lost in technical details. She was my compass for 35 years of marriage. Despite all the success that followed, the patents, the government contracts, the expansion from that garage to a 200,000 square foot facility, I never changed who I was. I still live in the same ranch house Paige and I bought when Madison was 8 years old. Still drive my Ford F-150, though I did upgrade from the 1995 model to a 2016. Still shop at H-E-B for groceries and still prefer Shiner Bock to expensive wine. Paige always was the smart one about people, could read them like a technical manual, and she never, not once, trusted Zane Brooks from the moment Madison brought him home 5 years ago. He doesn't see Madison, Griffin, she'd warned me after that first dinner, her voice gentle but firm. He sees dollar signs, he sees Calloway Biosystems stock options. Watch his eyes when you talk about work. They light up like Christmas morning. I'd always laugh it off back then. Come on, Paige. He loves her. Sure, he's ambitious, but that's not necessarily bad. Madison could use someone who challenges her to think bigger. How wrong I was. Paige has been gone 3 years, and her words echo in my head every time I watch that man operate. Madison and Zane live a lifestyle that makes absolutely no sense to me. They lease matching BMW X5s that cost more per month than my mortgage payment ever did. They vacation in places I've only seen in business magazines. Wine tastings in Sonoma, ski weekends in Vail, beach resorts in the Bahamas. Zane claims he runs some high-end import-export consulting business, but I'm a numbers guy. I built a biotech company from nothing. I know when someone's drowning in debt. I've seen the collection letters that get delivered to my house by mistake because they listed his old address wrong. Credit cards, personal loans, something about cryptocurrency investments that went sideways. The man's leveraged to his eyeballs. But here's what really gets me. My daughter changed after Paige died. Madison grew distant, defensive, like she was protecting Zane from my questions about his work. She'd shut down conversations about their finances, changed the subject whenever I asked about their business plans. It was like watching a wall go up between us, brick by brick. Then 6 months ago, everything shifted. When news of the Calloway Biosystems acquisition started hitting the Austin Business Journal and TechCrunch, suddenly they were very present in my life again. "Dad, let us help you with all this paperwork. You shouldn't handle this complex transaction alone at your age. Dad, are you sure your financial advisor really understands biotechnology deals? Zane has experience with international business structures." I was so damn lonely after losing Paige that I welcomed their sudden attention. I mistook their greed for genuine concern about my welfare. Tonight at the Driskill, that concern felt like a noose tightening around my neck. We had the best table in the house at the Driskill Grill, overlooking downtown Austin's glittering lights. The restaurant was everything you'd expect from a place where oil executives and tech moguls close deals. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, waiters who moved like they were performing surgery. The kind of place where a steak costs more than most people spend on groceries in a week. "Griffin, you're an absolute legend," Zane said, raising his glass of some overpriced Bordeaux the sommelier had recommended. "To the man who built an empire from nothing, from a garage in Austin to a $45 million exit. That's the American dream right there." Madison chimed in with that brilliant smile of hers, the one that reminded me so much of her mother. "We're just so proud of you, Daddy." Mom would be over the moon. But here's the thing. Their eyes weren't matching their words. They weren't proud. They were hungry. They looked at me like I was a winning lottery ticket they'd been carrying around for years, finally ready to cash in. "So Dad," Zane said, leaning forward with that oily charm I'd learned to recognize, "with Calloway Biosystems officially sold, what happens to all that infrastructure? The shipping routes, those climate-controlled container systems?" Now that was an odd question, and it wasn't the first time he'd asked about our logistics. "We're in biotechnology. We ship sensitive medical compounds, experimental pharmaceuticals, genetic samples. Everything moves in climate-controlled, GPS-tracked containers under strict FDA and DEA regulations. It's the most secure, most boring, most heavily monitored part of the business. It's all part of the acquisition, Zane. Biogen Industries takes over everything: facilities, equipment, shipping contracts, regulatory compliance." "Why do you ask?" He just shrugged, taking another sip of wine. "Seems like a waste of good logistics infrastructure, that's all. Those routes to Europe, Asia, lot of potential there." I filed that comment away in the back of my mind. Zane had been asking these kinds of questions for months. How secure were our shipping manifests? Who handled customs clearance in Rotterdam? Had we ever had a container just go missing? I'd thought it was idle curiosity, maybe trying to sound smart to impress the old man. Now I was starting to wonder. That's when my phone buzzed against my jacket. The caller ID showed Rothschild & Associates, my investment bank, the final confirmation call I'd been waiting for. "I need to take this," I said, excusing myself from the table. I noticed Madison and Zane exchange a quick look as I stood up. Later, I'd realized that look was pure anticipation. I walked out to the marble-floored lobby, past the oil paintings of long-dead cattle barons, and the display case full of antique silver. The call was brief and life-changing. "Mr. Calloway, this is Janet Richardson at Rothschild. I'm calling to confirm that the $45 million wire transfer has cleared into your designated accounts. All documentation is complete. Congratulations, sir. It's official." I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in years: complete freedom. The weight of 35 years of responsibility, of payrolls and FDA inspections and quarterly earnings calls, just lifted off my shoulders. I was 58 years old, worth $45 million, and for the first time since I was 23 and fresh out of the Navy, I had no boss, no board of directors, no employees depending on me. I could retire, travel, maybe write that book about biotech entrepreneurship I'd been thinking about. Hell, maybe I'd buy an RV and drive across the country, visit all those national parks Paige had always wanted to see. I turned around to head back to the table, back to my family, back to celebrating this incredible milestone. That's when I saw him. A young waiter, maybe 24 years old, standing near the service station by the kitchen doors. His name tag read Caleb. His uniform was immaculate: black slacks, crisp white shirt, black tie, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his empty water pitcher. He looked like a man who'd just witnessed a car accident. "Mr. Calloway," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced around nervously, making sure no other staff were watching. "I'm really sorry to bother you, sir, but I have to tell you something. It's about your table. I've run a multi-million-dollar company for decades. I've sat across from venture capitalists, FDA regulators, hostile corporate raiders. I've learned to read people, their tells, their motivations, their honesty level. This kid wasn't running a scam or looking for a tip. He was genuinely terrified." "What is it, Caleb?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sir, I was refilling water glasses at the station right behind your table about 5 minutes ago. Your son-in-law," he pointed to that big landscape painting on the far wall, "and asked your daughter some loud question about whether she thought it was a real Bierstadt or a reproduction. It felt staged, you know? Like he was making sure you'd turn around and look away from the table. My blood started turning cold, but I kept my voice steady. Go on. The second you both turned to look at that painting, your daughter moved fast, sir. Really fast. She pulled a small, brown glass vial from her purse, one of those little pharmaceutical bottles with the white cap. She unscrewed it and dumped white powder into your wine glass. Then she swirled the glass once with her finger and slipped the vial back into her purse. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds, but I had a clear view from the service station. The lobby suddenly felt ice cold, despite the warm Texas evening outside. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My own daughter, my Madison, the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read her bedtime stories about brave princesses and loyal knights. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw, Caleb? He nodded, his eyes wide with fear and certainty. Yes, sir, 100%. I saw the vial clearly. Brown glass, maybe an inch tall, with a white plastic cap. She hid it under her napkin for a second after, but I definitely saw her put it back in her black purse when you stood up to take your phone call. This kid had just saved my life, and he didn't even know the full scope of what he'd prevented. I reached into my wallet and pulled out all the cash I had, about $500 in 20s and 50s. His eyes went wide as I pressed the bills into his shaking hands. Caleb, I said, looking him straight in the eye, you didn't see anything tonight. You're going to finish your shift, go home, and never speak of this to anyone, but you just saved my life. I handed him one of my personal business cards, the plain ones without any corporate logos. If you're ever in trouble, ever need a job, ever need anything at all, you call this number. Understood? He nodded quickly and disappeared back toward the kitchen. I stood alone in that marble lobby for a full minute, processing what I just learned while the sounds of expensive conversation and clinking crystal drifted from the dining room. The rage was immediate and physical, a hot iron burning in my chest. But I couldn't let emotion drive my decisions. Not now. I was a Navy engineer before I was a CEO, and both had taught me the same lesson. When facing a crisis, you assess, you plan, then you execute. Emotion gets people killed. My mind started working like the engineer I'd trained to be. White powder designed to dissolve quickly in wine. This wasn't poison. Too messy, too traceable in a crowded restaurant with witnesses and security cameras. This was something else. Something clinical and calculated. I thought back to conversations from the past few weeks. Madison saying, "Dad, you've been so forgetful lately. You missed our dinner reservation on Tuesday." Except I hadn't missed it. I'd called the restaurant that morning to confirm, and they told me no reservation existed under Calloway. Zane's comment from just 2 days ago. "Griffin, you seem confused about some of the sale details. Are you sure you're okay managing all this money and legal complexity alone?" The pieces started clicking together like circuit components on a Navy schematic. This wasn't about killing me. It was about incapacitating me. The powder was meant to create sudden, terrifying confusion, to make me look like I'd suffered some kind of mental breakdown right after securing $45 million. They were building a case for incompetency. I remembered something else. Last month, when I'd been using Madison's laptop to look up a recipe for Paige's famous peach cobbler that Madison supposedly had saved, I'd accidentally seen her email inbox and noticed a subject line that said, "Calloway Contingency." At the time, I'd smiled and closed it, thinking maybe they were planning a surprise retirement party. Contingency. What a damn fool I'd been. But here's what they didn't count on. I wasn't just some confused old man they could manipulate. I was Griffin Calloway, Navy engineer, biotech entrepreneur, a man who'd spent 35 years solving complex problems under pressure. And right now, standing in that lobby, I had the biggest tactical advantage possible. They didn't know I knew. I needed to get back to that table. I needed to play my part perfectly. And most importantly, I needed to make sure that whatever was in my wine glass ended up in the right person's stomach. I composed my face into a mask of mild distraction. Just an old man coming back from a business call. I straightened my tie, took a deep breath, and walked back into the dining room. The scene looked exactly the same as when I'd left. Madison and Zane were leaning toward each other, talking in low voices. My wine glass sat exactly where I'd left it, the deep red Bordeaux looking perfectly normal. No visible residue, no cloudiness. Whatever Madison had put in there was designed to be undetectable. "Sorry about that," I said, settling back into my chair. "Lawyers always find one more thing to worry about." "Everything okay, Dad?" Madison asked with that radiant smile. It was the smile of someone who thought she'd just executed the perfect crime. "Just the usual legal loose ends," I said, settling back into my chair and reaching for my wine glass. The poisoned one. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday." I held the glass up to the light as if admiring the color, but really I was studying Madison's face. She was watching my every move with an intensity that would have seemed like loving concern to anyone else. But I knew better now. She was waiting for me to drink. "Dad, you look tired," she said softly. "This has been such a big day for you. Maybe you should take it easy on the wine." The audacity was breathtaking. Here she was, pretending to be concerned about my alcohol consumption while she'd just poisoned my drink. "You're probably right, sweetheart, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. A man only sells his life's work once." I set the glass down without drinking and picked up my menu. "You know what? Let's order dessert. I'm thinking about that chocolate souffle they're famous for here." For the next 10 minutes, I played the part of the successful businessman winding down from a big day. I asked Zane about his latest import deals, those vague stories about textiles from Turkey and coffee from Colombia that never quite added up when you pressed for details. I listened to Madison talk about some lifestyle blog she was supposedly starting, though she'd been about to launch it for 2 years now. All the while, I was waiting for my moment. I needed a distraction, something that would give me cover to switch the glasses without them noticing. The opportunity came when our waiter approached with the dessert menu. Not Caleb, a different server, an older gentleman who moved with practiced efficiency. As he leaned across the table to set down the leather-bound menus, I made my move. I accidentally jerked my elbow back, connecting solidly with Zane's full water glass. Ice water exploded across the white tablecloth like a small tsunami, flooding toward Madison's side of the table. "Oh, hell!" I exclaimed, jumping up. "Zane, I'm sorry! Griffin, honestly!" Zane snapped, leaping back as ice water dripped onto his $1,000 suit pants. He started cursing under his breath, grabbing for napkins. Madison gasped and pushed her chair back. "Dad, look what you did!" It was pure chaos for about 5 seconds. The waiter rushed in with more napkins, apologizing profusely even though it wasn't his fault. Other diners turned to look. Madison was dabbing at the table with her napkin while scolding me about being more careful. And in those 5 seconds of controlled chaos, my hands moved with the precision of a Navy engineer who'd spent years working in tight spaces under pressure. My right hand picked up my tainted glass. My left hand picked up Madison's clean glass. I moved them both away from the spreading water, and when I set them back down, they'd traded places. It was done. Simple, fast, invisible. "I am so sorry, everyone," I said, sitting back down and dabbing at the table with my own napkin. "Guess my coordination isn't what it used to be. Maybe I am getting old." "It's fine, Dad," Madison said, though I caught her sharing a quick, knowing look with Zane. They thought my clumsiness was the first sign that their drug was starting to work. They thought their plan was right on track. They had no idea what I'd just done. The waiter finished cleaning up the mess and left us with fresh napkins and new water glasses. The tension at the table shifted back to the artificial warmth they'd been projecting all evening. "Well," I said, picking up my glass, Madison's original clean glass, and raising it high. Despite my graceful coordination display, I still want to make that toast. They both raised their glasses. Madison was holding my original glass, the one with whatever powder was supposed to destroy my mind. "To family," I said, looking directly into Madison's eyes, "and to everyone getting exactly what they deserve." "To family," Madison echoed, her smile brilliant and confident. She took a large, deliberate sip of the poisoned wine. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I moved food around my plate, pretending to eat the perfectly prepared steak that now tasted like cardboard. I listened to Zane brag about some European expansion he was planning, presumably with my money. I nodded and smiled and played the role of the successful father celebrating with his loving family. But mostly, I watched Madison. It started subtly. She blinked hard a couple of times, like she was trying to clear something from her vision. "Zane," she murmured, interrupting him mid-sentence about some business opportunity in Berlin. "Is it just me, or do the lights seem really bright in here?" Zane barely looked up from his story. "It's the Driskill, darling. Everything's bright and elegant here. As I was saying, the Berlin market has incredible potential for—" "No," Madison said, her voice getting thicker. She pressed her hand to her temple. I feel dizzy. Really dizzy." That's when Zane finally looked at her, and I saw his expression change from annoyance to confusion to the first flicker of panic. "I'm not playing around," Madison tried to say, but the words came out slurred and thick. "Zane, something's wrong. Really wrong." She tried to stand up, pushing her chair back with a harsh, scraping sound against the polished floor. "The room is spinning. I can't—" Her words trailed off into mumbled nonsense. Zane's face went from confusion to outright panic. He looked at Madison, then at me, then back at Madison. I could see his mind racing, trying to process what was happening. His wife was supposed to be fine. I was supposed to be the one having problems. "Madison, stop this," he hissed under his breath. "You're making a scene. People are staring." But she wasn't acting. Her eyes rolled back in her head, showing mostly white. She swayed for a moment, then slumped sideways in her chair like a marionette with cut strings. Her arms began twitching in small, involuntary movements. The beginning of a seizure. The elegant dining room went dead silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Crystal glasses paused halfway to lips. Every eye in the place turned toward our table. This was my moment. I had to sell the performance of my life. "Oh my God, Madison!" I shouted, leaping from my chair so fast it almost fell backward. My voice cracked with perfectly practiced panic. "Somebody help! Something's wrong with my daughter!" I rushed to her side, grabbing her limp, cold hand. Her skin was clammy and her pulse was racing. Whatever she'd put in that wine was serious stuff. "Help! Somebody call 911. I looked around the restaurant desperately. "My daughter, she's not breathing right." But here's the thing that told me everything I needed to know about Zane Brooks. He didn't rush to his wife's side. He didn't check her pulse or cradle her head or call her name. He just sat there, frozen, staring at Madison with an expression that wasn't grief or fear for her well-being. It was the raw, naked terror of a criminal whose perfect plan had just exploded in his face. "Zane!" I grabbed his shoulder, shaking him hard. "Do something. Call an ambulance. Don't just sit there." That snapped him out of his paralysis, but not in the way a loving husband would react. Instead of helping Madison, his first instinct was damage control. "No," he said sharply, jumping up and pulling out his phone but not dialing anything. "She's fine. She's had too much wine. That's all this is." I stared at him with feigned outrage. "Too much wine? Zane, look at her. She's convulsing." "She does this sometimes," he said quickly, his eyes darting around the room as he built his lie in real time. "She mixes her anxiety medication with alcohol. It happens. It's embarrassing, but it's not dangerous. We just need to get her home." The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to physically remove Madison from the restaurant, away from neutral paramedics who would run tests, away from emergency room doctors who would order toxicology reports. He needed to get her to his corrupt doctor to salvage what was left of their plan. I saw Caleb watching from the service station across the room. His face was pale with understanding. He knew exactly what was happening. The restaurant manager appeared at our table. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit who clearly wasn't paid enough to deal with medical emergencies. "Sir, should I call 911? "No," Zane said, too loudly. Several nearby diners looked over with concern. "No, that's not necessary. I'm her husband. I'll handle this. We're leaving." "He's in shock," I announced to the manager and anyone else within earshot. "He doesn't know what he's saying. She needs medical attention right now." That's when Caleb stepped forward from across the room, his cell phone already pressed to his ear. His voice carried clearly in the silent dining room. "I've already called 911, he said, looking directly at Zane. "The dispatcher said not to move her under any circumstances. Paramedics are on their way." Zane's head snapped toward Caleb like a rattlesnake. The look in his eyes was pure murder. "You did what? You little—" He caught himself before saying something that would make him look even worse. "You're fired. You have no idea what you've just done." The manager stepped between them, his voice firm but polite. "Sir, the young man did exactly the right thing. When a guest has a medical emergency on our premises, we're legally required to call for professional assistance. Please step back and let us help your wife." The wail of sirens cut through the Austin night, growing louder and closer. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, the sound of justice arriving right on schedule. Zane was trapped now. His mask of the charming, successful son-in-law was cracking. He looked around the room wildly, seeing all the witnesses, all the people who would remember this night. He was cornered, and he knew it. The paramedics rushed through the front doors of the restaurant, pushing a gurney and carrying equipment cases. Professional, efficient, focused. They brushed past Zane like he was furniture. "Sir, please step back. Ma'am, can you hear me?" The lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s, immediately began assessing Madison's condition. "What did she consume tonight?" "I don't know what she took," Zane said to the paramedic, his voice pitched high with manufactured panic. "She has anxiety medication. She sometimes mixes it with wine. I keep telling her not to, but..." The paramedic wasn't buying it. "What's the name of the medication, sir? We need specifics." Zane froze. He couldn't give them the real name of the drug without incriminating himself. I don't remember the exact name. It's something for anxiety. She keeps it in her purse." They loaded Madison onto the gurney with professional efficiency. She was unconscious, her face pale and slack, her breathing shallow but steady. For a moment, watching them wheel my daughter away, I felt a stab of genuine fear. Whatever drug she'd intended for me was serious enough to put her in real danger, but she'd made her choice the moment she'd unscrewed that vial. I followed the gurney out to the ambulance, playing the part of the terrified father. My baby. Is she going to be okay? Please, tell me she's going to be okay. They let me ride in the ambulance while Zane followed behind in his BMW. During that 10-minute ride to Austin Medical Center, I watched the paramedics work. They started an IV, checked her vitals, radioed ahead to the emergency room. Professional, competent, focused on saving her life. The irony wasn't lost on me. These strangers were working harder to help my daughter than her own husband had. Austin Medical Center's emergency room was controlled chaos under fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic and floor wax, the sound of urgent voices and beeping machines. They wheeled Madison straight into Trauma Bay 3, and Zane appeared beside me, slightly out of breath from running through the parking garage. "She's allergic to shellfish," he immediately started telling the intake nurse. "I think she had a reaction to something she ate. Maybe cross-contamination in the kitchen. That's what this is." He was still trying to control the narrative, still building his false story, but he was about to meet someone who wouldn't be so easily manipulated. Dr. Wade Parker pushed through the curtain into the trauma bay. He was young, maybe early 30s, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. His scrubs were wrinkled from a long shift, but he moved with the confidence of someone who'd seen everything the emergency room could throw at him. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Dr. Parker. I need to know exactly what your wife consumed tonight." Zane stuck to his rehearsed script. "It was an allergic reaction. Shellfish. She's severely allergic. Just give her epinephrine and she'll be fine." Dr. Parker ignored him completely. He pulled out a pen light and checked Madison's pupils. He lifted her arm. It dropped back to the gurney like dead weight. He checked her reflexes, listened to her heart and lungs. "Sir," he said, straightening up and looking directly at Zane, "this is not anaphylaxis. Her airways are completely clear. No facial swelling, no rash, no difficulty breathing. Her pupils are severely constricted. This is a drug overdose." Zane's face went white. "No, that's impossible. She doesn't do drugs. I need to run a complete toxicology screen," Dr. Parker said firmly. "This presentation suggests a serious overdose of some kind of central nervous system depressant." Zane stepped forward, trying to block the doctor's access to Madison. "No. Absolutely not. I'm her husband, and I'm refusing those tests. It's just an allergy. You're wasting time with unnecessary procedures." His panic was real now. He knew exactly what was in Madison's bloodstream, and he was terrified of it being identified by name. Dr. Parker didn't even blink. "Sir, your wife is presenting with severe neurological symptoms that could be life-threatening. If you continue to interfere with my ability to diagnose and treat her, I will have security remove you from this trauma bay immediately. Are we clear?" That's when Zane turned to me with desperate eyes. "Dad, tell him she just had an allergic reaction." This was my moment. I stepped forward, letting my voice tremble with emotion. "Doctor, please, just save her. He's in shock. He doesn't know what he's saying. Do whatever tests you need to do. Please, just save my little girl." Dr. Parker looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway. We'll take excellent care of her." He turned to the nurse. "Full toxicology panel, complete blood count, head CT scan. Get her on continuous monitoring and push some Narcan in case there's an opiate component." Zane was defeated. He slammed his fist against the wall, a gesture that looked like grief to the medical staff, but I recognized as pure rage at his plan falling apart. We were escorted to the family waiting room while they worked on Madison. Gray plastic chairs bolted to the floor, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of bad coffee and disinfectant. Zane immediately pulled out his phone and started making calls, pacing the length of the small room. I caught fragments of his conversations. "Reed, it's me. The plan went sideways. She's the one who, they're running tests. What do we do now?" Dr. Reed. The first piece of the puzzle I could actually use. Zane was calling his corrupt doctor, trying to figure out how to salvage their conspiracy, but it was too late. The machine was already in motion, and all the bought doctors in Texas couldn't stop it now. An hour passed in that sterile waiting room. Zane kept pacing, making hushed phone calls, his voice getting more frantic with each conversation. I sat in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, playing the role of the worried father, but my mind was working like the strategic planner I'd been trained to be in the Navy. I needed more information, I needed evidence, and I knew exactly where to find it. "Zane," I said, standing up slowly like an old man whose joints were bothering him. "I can't just sit here. This waiting is killing me. I think I'm going to go home and try to get some rest." He looked up from his phone, relief washing over his face. The last thing he wanted was me hanging around asking questions or talking to doctors. "That's probably smart, Griffin. You look exhausted. Why don't you take a cab? I'll stay here and handle everything with the medical team." "You sure you'll be okay on your own, son?" "I'll be fine," he said, already turning back to his phone. "I'll call you the minute I know anything. I took a cab, all right, but not to my house." 47. Willow Creek Drive, I told the driver, Madison and Zane's address. They lived in one of those new construction neighborhoods west of Austin. Massive houses crammed together on tiny lots, all trying to look like southern mansions but built with particle board and cheap labor. The kind of place where people live beyond their means to impress neighbors they don't actually like. Their house was dark, all the windows black against the night sky. I knew they kept a spare key under the ceramic pot by the back door because Madison had mentioned it months ago when she was complaining about Zane losing his keys at the gym. Some habits from her childhood stuck around. We'd always hidden a spare key when she was growing up. I let myself in through the back door, my heart pounding not with fear but with adrenaline. I wasn't breaking and entering. I was conducting a reconnaissance mission on enemy territory. The house felt different at night. During my previous visits, it had seemed like a showplace. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, abstract art on the walls, furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. Now, in the darkness, it felt hollow, like a movie set designed to look successful but without any real substance behind it. I made my way to their home office, a room I'd glimpsed briefly during previous visits but never really examined. Madison's white desk sat against the far wall, clean and organized, her laptop closed in the center. I sat down and opened it. No password protection. That told me everything about their arrogance. They never believed I was smart enough to be a threat. I opened her email program and started searching. I didn't need to look hard. I just typed "Reed" into the search box and dozens of emails popped up immediately. What I read in the next 30 minutes made my blood run colder with each message. From ryan.brooks.consulting@gmail.com to madison.callaway.writer@gmail.com, drareed.md@privityMedical.com, subject, Calloway, contingency, timeline Reed. He's getting suspicious about the shipping questions. We need to accelerate the timeline. The acquisition closes next week. Once that federal audit starts, we're all dead. Madison. Your father is sharper than we thought. We can't afford any more delays. From drareed.md@privatemedical.com to ryan.brooks.consulting@gmail.com. Subject, Calloway contingency. The risk is high. A forced psychiatric commitment requires a precipitating event. You can't just claim he's confused. He needs to be confused in front of witnesses. I've prescribed the olanzapine under a false patient name. The dosage I'm recommending will induce acute psychosis and symptoms mimicking a stroke within 20-30 minutes of ingestion. From madison.callaway.writer@gmail.com to ryan.brooks.consulting@gmail.com, drareed.md@privatemedical.com. Subject, Calloway contingency. I'll do it at the celebration dinner. He'll be distracted and happy. He trusts me completely. Once he's hospitalized, Reed can take over the medical evaluation. Ryan, you need to have the conservatorship petition ready to file first thing in the morning. We have to move fast before anyone starts asking questions. From Ryan Brooks.consulting@gmail.com to Madison.Calloway.writer@gmail.com. Subject: the shipping problem. Madison, you don't understand how serious this is. I've been using your father's legitimate biotech shipping routes to move product from my Colombian contacts. Fentanyl precursors mostly. The profit margins are incredible, but if that federal audit goes through, they'll find everything. Every manifest, every container, every falsified customs document. We're not just talking about losing the $45 million, we're talking about 20 years in federal prison for drug trafficking. My hands were shaking as I read that last email. So that's what this was really about. Zane hadn't just been asking innocent questions about our shipping infrastructure. He'd been using Calloway Biosystems, my company, my reputation, my life's work, as a front for smuggling illegal drugs into the country. The $45 million deal wasn't his opportunity. It was his death sentence. Biogen Industries, the acquiring company, would conduct a mandatory top-to-bottom audit of every aspect of our operations. They'd find his illegal shipments within weeks. But there was more. I kept reading, finding email after email detailing their conspiracy. From law offices, Morrison, TXS email, com, to Ryan Brooks.consulting@gmail.com. Subject: emergency conservatorship petition, Griffin Calloway. Attached: please find the completed emergency petition for conservatorship over Griffin Calloway, age 58. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, December 15th at 9:00 a.m. in courtroom 4B, Travis County Family Court. As discussed, the petition alleges rapid onset dementia, paranoid behavior, and financial incapacity. Your medical expert, Dr. Albert Reed, will provide testimony supporting these claims. If granted, this will give you immediate control over all assets pending a full competency evaluation. Please review the attached documents and confirm your appearance tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. In less than 8 hours, I was supposed to be declared incompetent and stripped of control over my life's work. They had it all planned out: the drug, the false medical testimony, the emergency court hearing. By 10 a.m. tomorrow, I was supposed to be a ward of the state, with Zane Brooks holding power of attorney over $45 million. I printed every email. The printer in their office was one of those expensive all-in-one machines that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using equipment bought with money they'd essentially stolen from me to document their crimes. When I was finished, I had 47 pages of evidence. Email chains detailing the drugging plan, the corrupt medical testimony, the federal crimes, the conservatorship hearing, everything I needed to destroy them completely. I also found something else in Madison's desk drawer. A small brown glass vial identical to the one Caleb had described. It was empty now, but there were still a few grains of white powder stuck to the bottom. Physical evidence of the weapon they'd tried to use against me. I wrapped the vial carefully in tissue paper and slipped it into my jacket pocket along with the printed emails. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and sat in the darkness for a few minutes. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even just about family betrayal. Zane had turned my company into a criminal enterprise. He'd used my good name, my reputation, my federal licenses to smuggle drugs that were killing people across America. And my daughter, my own flesh and blood, had helped him every step of the way. I let myself out the back door and called another cab, but I didn't go home. I had one more stop to make before this night was over. I didn't go home. Instead, I had the cab drop me off at the Frost Bank Tower downtown. At 2:30 in the morning, the 33-story building was mostly dark except for security lights and the occasional workaholic burning the midnight oil. But I knew one light would be on. Tucker Hayes doesn't sleep much. The man's been my corporate attorney for 15 years, and I'd learned that when there's a crisis, he operates on coffee and pure adrenaline. More importantly, he's not the kind of lawyer who handles wills and divorces. Tucker is a shark, the kind of attorney you call when someone's trying to destroy everything you've built. I used my keycard to access the executive elevator and rode it to the 28th floor. The hallway was eerily quiet, but I could see light spilling from under Tucker's office door at the end of the corridor. I knocked twice and walked in without waiting for an answer. Tucker was sitting behind his massive oak desk, still wearing a suit despite the hour, reading documents under the light of a banker's lamp. He looked up as I entered, took one look at my face, and immediately closed whatever file he'd been reviewing. "Griffin," he said, his voice gravelly from too much coffee and not enough sleep. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "What the hell happened?" "Worse than a ghost, Tucker. I've seen a monster. 2 of them, actually. And one of them is my own daughter." For the next hour, I told him everything. I didn't break down, didn't raise my voice, didn't let emotion cloud the facts. I gave him a CEO's report. Chronological, detailed, methodical. The celebration dinner, Caleb's warning, the switched glasses, Madison's collapse, the hospital, and finally, the emails I'd found at their house. Tucker listened without interrupting, his face an impassive mask. He's heard every kind of corporate horror story imaginable, but even he seemed stunned by the scope of what Zane and Madison had planned. When I finished, I placed the printed emails on his desk along with the empty vial wrapped in tissue paper. That's 47 pages of conspiracy documented in their own words. And that's the physical evidence of the weapon they tried to use on me. Tucker picked up the first few pages and started reading. His expression grew darker with each email. When he reached the one about using Calloway Biosystems shipping routes for drug trafficking, he let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Griffin, this isn't just family fraud. This is federal trafficking charges. This is RICO territory." "There's more," I said. I pulled out the conservatorship petition I'd found. They have a hearing scheduled for 9 a.m. this morning, emergency conservatorship. If I hadn't found out about their plan, I'd be declared incompetent and stripped of all assets by lunchtime today. Tucker stood up and started pacing behind his desk. "So let me understand this correctly. Your son-in-law has been using your company's legitimate shipping infrastructure to smuggle illegal drugs. Your daughter tried to drug you with a powerful antipsychotic to make you appear mentally incompetent, and they have a corrupt doctor ready to testify that you're suffering from dementia. That's the size of it. And the hearing is in..." He checked his watch. 6.5 hours. "Right." Tucker's expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost predatory. "Griffin, we're going to destroy them." He pressed a button on his phone that connected him to a secure line. "Peterson, it's Hayes. I don't care what time it is, wake up." He didn't wait for a response. "I need a full workup on 2 individuals, Dr. Albert Reed, spelled R-E-E-D, and Zane Brooks, B-R-O-O-K-S. I want everything. Bank records, debts, medical board violations, traffic tickets, what they ate for breakfast last Tuesday, and I need it in 3 hours." He hung up and looked at me. "Peterson runs the best private investigation firm in Texas. If there's dirt on Dr. Reed or your son-in-law, he'll find it. What about the hearing this morning?" Tucker's smile was cold and calculating. "Oh, we're going to that hearing. But not to defend you, Griffin. We're going to prosecute them." He pulled up something on his computer and started typing rapidly. "Dr. Reed is the weak link. He connects Zane's plan to an actual criminal conspiracy. They think they're walking into a simple family court proceeding to roll over a confused old man." Tucker paused in his typing and looked at me directly. They have no idea they're actually walking into their own execution. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Tucker made call after call, pulling strings with judges, prosecutors, and federal agents. I'd always known he was well connected, but watching him work was like seeing a master craftsman at his trade. At 5:15 a.m., Peterson's report came through on Tucker's encrypted email. Tucker read it with growing satisfaction. "Your Dr. Reed is in deep financial trouble," he announced. "Gambling debts to the tune of $320,000 to an offshore sports betting operation. And guess who owns that operation through a series of shell companies? Zane. Bingo. Reed isn't just a conspirator. He's Zane's debt slave. We've got financial records showing regular payments from something called Brooks Consulting International directly into Reed's personal accounts." Tucker kept reading. "This gets better. Brooks Consulting International is registered in the Cayman Islands, but the actual business operations trace back to a warehouse in East Austin. Want to guess what's in that warehouse? Drug precursors, among other things. The DEA has been watching that location for 6 months as part of a larger investigation into fentanyl trafficking routes from South America. I felt pieces clicking together like components in a complex engineering system. So when I sold Calloway Biosystems and triggered that mandatory audit, Zane knew he was dead. The audit would have found evidence of his illegal shipments within weeks. The federal investigation would have followed within days. He wasn't trying to steal your money, Griffin. He was trying to buy time to cover his tracks and disappear. Tucker stood up and started gathering files. But here's the beautiful part. By trying to frame you for incompetency, he's walked straight into a federal conspiracy charge. By bribing Dr. Reed, he's added witness tampering. And by using your company's shipping licenses for drug trafficking, he's looking at RICO violations that could put him away for life. The eastern sky was starting to show the first pale hints of dawn through Tucker's office windows. In 3 hours, Zane and Madison thought they'd be walking into a courthouse to claim victory over a confused old man. Instead, they were walking into a carefully prepared trap that would destroy them completely. "What's our play?" I asked. Tucker checked his watch and started putting on his jacket. "First, we go to that courthouse. Second, we let them commit perjury in front of a federal judge. Third, we watch the FBI arrest them for conspiracy, fraud, and drug trafficking." He paused at the door. "Griffin, by noon today, your son-in-law is going to be in federal custody facing 20 to life. Your daughter will be lucky if she only gets 5 years as an accessory." I stood up, straightening my tie. For the first time in hours, I felt completely calm. Then let's go finish this. Travis County Family Court was a study in contrasts at 8:30 in the morning. The building itself was all marble and mahogany, designed to project dignity and justice. But the people gathered outside courtroom 4B looked like they were attending a funeral rather than a legal proceeding. Tucker and I positioned ourselves at the end of the hallway where we could observe without being seen. Through the small wire mesh window in the courtroom door, I could see them, my family, my would-be executioners. Zane was pacing like a caged animal. He'd clearly been up all night, probably coordinating with Dr. Reed and trying to figure out damage control after Madison's collapse. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from stress and whatever substances he'd used to stay awake. Next to him sat his lawyer, a young, slick-looking man in a suit that screamed strip mall legal clinic, the kind of attorney who probably advertised on late-night television between personal injury commercials. And then there was Dr. Reed. He was sitting alone on a bench, perfectly still except for his hands, which he kept clasping and unclasping. Every few seconds he'd dab at his forehead with a handkerchief. The man was terrified, and he should have been. "They don't know you're here yet," Tucker observed quietly. "Look at Zane's body language. He thinks he's won by default." As if on cue, Zane stopped pacing and leaned down to whisper something to his lawyer. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the satisfaction on his face. He thought I was either still confused from the drug or wandering around Austin in a hospital gown proving his case for him. "Griffin's not here," I heard him say to Dr. Reed as we got closer. "It's perfect. Better than we planned. He's missing, confused, probably dangerous to himself. This just proves our case." Dr. Reed nodded nervously, but his hands were still shaking. What if he shows up?" "He won't," Zane said confidently. "Even if he does, look at him. He's been acting erratic for weeks. We have you ready to testify about his mental state. We have documentation of his paranoid behavior. This is a done deal." At 8:55, the bailiff's voice echoed from inside the courtroom. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patricia Williams presiding. Tucker put a hand on my shoulder. "Not yet. Let them commit first." Through the window, I could see Judge Williams take her seat, a stern woman in her 50s with gray hair and intelligent eyes. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and having little patience for frivolous proceedings. "We are here for the emergency hearing regarding the conservatorship of Griffin Calloway," Judge Williams announced. "Case number 2024, CV 4792. Is the petitioner present?" Zane's lawyer stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. Michael Morrison representing petitioner Zane Brooks, who is present in court. Mr. Morrison, this is a very serious matter. You're asking this court to strip an individual of his fundamental rights based on alleged mental incapacity. I trust you have compelling evidence." "We do, Your Honor," Morrison said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Mr. Brooks and his wife have been desperately trying to manage what can only be described as a catastrophic mental decline in Mr. Calloway. We had hoped to handle this privately, but last night a terrible incident occurred. Here it came, the performance I'd been waiting for. Mr. Calloway, in a fit of severe paranoia and confusion, violently attacked his own daughter at a public restaurant. He caused a massive scene and then fled. As of this moment, he is missing." Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. "Missing, Mr. Morrison?" "Yes, Your Honor." My client and the family's physician conducted a wellness check at Mr. Calloway's residence early this morning. The house was empty. Mr. Calloway has disappeared with access to $45 million in liquid assets that he is, in his current mental state, completely incapable of managing responsibly. Morrison was painting the perfect picture, a dangerous, confused old man loose in Austin with millions of dollars. Judge Williams looked appropriately concerned. This is a very serious allegation, Mr. Morrison. Given the assets involved and the fact that Mr. Calloway is missing, I'm inclined to grant emergency relief pending a full psychiatric evaluation. That was our cue. Tucker didn't knock. He simply pushed the heavy oak doors open with a confidence that filled the entire courtroom. I apologize for our tardiness, Your Honor. Tucker's voice boomed through the suddenly silent room. My client and I were dealing with some unexpected developments related to this case. I walked in behind him, not hunched over or confused, but standing tall in my best navy blue suit. My hair was combed, my shoes polished, my mind sharp as a surgical scalpel. The effect was immediate and devastating. Zane went completely white, not pale but the color of old paper. His jaw dropped open and stayed there. His lawyer Morrison spun around, his practiced confidence cracking like ice on a hot sidewalk. But my favorite reaction was Dr. Reed. When he saw me walk in, calm and composed, and very much not suffering from drug-induced psychosis, he made a small sound, half gasp, half whimper, and physically shrank into the bench. Your Honor, Tucker continued smoothly, I am Tucker Hayes, representing Mr. Griffin Calloway, who is very much present and in full possession of his faculties. Judge Williams looked confused but intrigued. Mr. Hayes, opposing counsel just told this court that your client was missing and potentially dangerous. Yes, Your Honor, I heard that testimony, which is interesting because my client has been in my office for the past 6 hours reviewing some very disturbing evidence of a criminal conspiracy targeting him. I walked calmly to the defendant's table and sat down, placing my briefcase on the floor. Tucker sat beside me. We looked like we owned the place, because we did. Mr. Morrison, Judge Williams said, clearly trying to catch up, you told this court that Mr. Calloway was missing and had suffered some kind of violent episode last night. Morrison was stammering, pointing a shaking finger at me. But he... Your Honor, this doesn't change anything. His erratic behavior, his disappearance last night, his sudden reappearance here, this only confirms our petition's allegations about his mental instability. Actually, Your Honor, Tucker said, standing up with a predatory smile, my client's whereabouts last night are easily explained. He was conducting his own investigation into what we've discovered is an elaborate criminal conspiracy involving witness tampering, medical fraud, and federal drug trafficking charges. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Tucker continued, we have evidence, extensive documentation, that Mr. Brooks and Dr. Reed have been engaged in a conspiracy to have my client falsely declared incompetent so they could gain control of his assets and cover up their illegal activities. Judge Williams leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, those are very serious accusations. Yes, Your Honor, which is why we've already shared our evidence with federal authorities. That's when the back doors of the courtroom opened again. 2 men in dark suits walked through the courtroom doors. They weren't courthouse security or bailiffs. They moved with the confident authority of federal agents, their eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. One of them, a tall man in his 40s, held up a badge for Judge Williams to see. Special Agent Davis, FBI. Your Honor, we apologize for the interruption, but we're here on urgent federal business related to this proceeding. Zane's face went from white to green. He looked around the courtroom like a trapped animal searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Dr. Reed made that small, whimpering sound again and seemed to be trying to disappear into the wooden bench. Your Honor, Agent Davis continued, based on evidence provided to us early this morning, we have reason to believe that this conservatorship petition is part of a larger criminal conspiracy involving federal drug trafficking, witness tampering, and fraud. Judge Williams sat back in her chair, clearly realizing this was no ordinary family dispute. Agent Davis, are you saying this court is being used to facilitate criminal activity? Yes, ma'am. We believe the petitioner, Mr. Brooks, and his medical witness, Dr. Reed, have conspired to have Mr. Calloway falsely declared incompetent in order to gain control of assets and cover up ongoing federal crimes. That's when Zane finally snapped. It wasn't gradual. It was a complete psychological break. He leaped up from his chair, pointing an accusing finger at me. "He's lying!" Zane screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "The old man is crazy. He poisoned his own daughter. He attacked Madison at the restaurant. He's the criminal here." His lawyer tried to grab his arm, tried to shut him up, but Zane was beyond reason now. He was a desperate man watching his entire world collapse in real time. "Arrest him!" Zane shrieked at the FBI agents. "He's violent. He's dangerous. I have a doctor who will testify." Agent Davis looked at Dr. Reed with mild interest. "Dr. Albert Reed, I presume?" Reed tried to speak, but only managed a strangled croak. He nodded miserably. "Dr. Reed," Agent Davis continued conversationally, "would you care to explain the $320,000 in payments you've received from Mr. Brooks' shell companies over the past 8 months? Reed broke completely. It wasn't a slow crumble, it was a total collapse. He buried his face in his hands and started sobbing. "He owned me," Reed wailed, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "I owed gambling debts. He bought my debt from the casino, said he'd ruin me if I didn't help, said it was just paperwork, said the old man was already confused anyway." "Dr. Reed," Agent Davis said calmly, "are you saying you were prepared to give false testimony in this court?" "He gave me the drug," Reed sobbed. "He told me what symptoms to look for. He said just make it look official. I never wanted." Judge Williams slammed her gavel so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Mr. Brooks, sit down immediately. Dr. Reed, you are admitting to perjury and conspiracy in my courtroom." But Zane was beyond caring about judicial authority. He spun toward me, his face twisted with pure hatred. "You bastard," he roared. 40 years you've had everything handed to you. Your wife, your daughter, your company, your money. You don't deserve any of it." He vaulted over the defendant's table, moving faster than I would have expected from a man his size. His hands were reaching for my throat, his eyes wild with the fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. But he never made it. The FBI agents moved with professional precision. Agent Davis intercepted Zane mid-leap, tackling him to the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the courtroom. His partner was already behind Dr. Reed, producing handcuffs. "Zane Brooks," Agent Davis announced as he cuffed Zane's hands behind his back, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, and federal drug trafficking violations. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda rights continued as they hauled Zane to his feet. He was still screaming, but the words had devolved into incoherent rage. His expensive suit was torn, his face flushed purple with fury and desperation. Dr. Reed wasn't fighting. He just sat there, handcuffed and sobbing, the wreckage of a man who had sold his medical license for gambling money and now faced the end of everything he'd worked for. Judge Williams looked at the chaos in her courtroom and then at me. "Mr. Calloway, I owe you an apology. This court was almost used as an instrument of fraud." I stood up slowly, feeling older than my 58 years, but also lighter than I'd felt in months. "Your Honor, justice was served. That's all that matters." As the FBI agents escorted Zane and Dr. Reed out of the courtroom, Zane turned back one final time. His eyes met mine across the room, and what I saw there wasn't hatred anymore. It was the cold realization of complete defeat. "This isn't over, Griffin," he called out as they dragged him through the doors. But it was over. We all knew it. 6 months later, I was sitting in my home office, the same ranch house where Paige and I had raised Madison, reading the final legal documents. Zane had been sentenced to 22 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and conspiracy. Dr. Reed got 8 years for his role in the scheme. Madison had been released from the hospital after a week, but she was a different person. The drug had broken something in her, not physically, but psychologically. She'd spent 2 months in a rehabilitation facility, not for substance abuse, but for what the counselors called moral realignment therapy. Now she was working at the Calloway Foundation, the veteran assistance program I'd established with part of my $45 million. Minimum wage, night shift, cleaning bathrooms, and serving meals to homeless veterans. Real work. Hard work. The kind that builds character instead of destroying it. I'd kept my promise to Caleb, too. The young waiter who'd saved my life was now my foundation's operations director, earning a 6-figure salary and helping me expand the program statewide. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Caleb, carrying his monthly reports and wearing the kind of genuine smile that money can't buy. "Mr. Calloway," he said, stepping into my kitchen, "I've got good news about the Austin facility." We sat at my old kitchen table while he opened his briefcase. Madison completed her 6th month yesterday. Her supervisor says she's different, better. She actually thanked him for the opportunity to help people. I poured us both coffee and looked out the window at the oak tree Paige and I had planted decades ago. The leaves were just beginning to turn gold with autumn. And the expansion plans? San Antonio approved our proposal. We'll be able to help 200 more veterans by Christmas. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The money was being used for something worthwhile. Zane was paying for his crimes. Madison was learning what her mother had tried to teach her about the value of honest work. Sometimes the people closest to you really are the ones you know the least. But sometimes, if you're patient enough and strong enough, you can help them find their way back to who they're supposed to be. Even if it means losing everything first to discover what really matters.